welcome to John Ranney Music. I will do a lesson on tuning the guitar in a little while. But today we're going to talk about open chords again. So the last lesson I showed you 3 open chords. They were G, C, and D. So today we're going to add a few more open chords. There's quite a few open chords, and these are the chords you want to learn first because they're easy to play, and so many songs are written around these chords. So today we're going to talk about E and A. Now there's a bunch of different ways to finger A, but we'll talk about why we use certain fingering. So let's get started. So the E chord. The E chord uses the E bass, the bottom string's an E, and then you have your A string, which is the second string. You're using your middle finger on the 2nd fret. And then the next note you're going to add in there is the 3rd string. This is the D string, another E note, and you're going to use your ring finger on the 2nd fret. So now you've got open, 2nd fret, 2nd fret. And then you've got your index finger on the 1st fret of this string here. This is a G string. And that makes it an A note. That's right, a G sharp, not an A, G sharp. So now we have, and then the top 2 strings are open. That's your E chord, okay? Now your A chord is a nice transition. I really like this fingering of the A chord. So there's a lot of different ways to finger the A chord, but I like this one because it makes the transition between E and A much easier. So how do we do an A chord? Well, the 2 bottom strings are open. Then we've got our middle finger on the 3rd string here on the 2nd fret. Now all the notes are on the 2nd fret in this chord. Then we've got our index finger on the next string, which is the G string, the 3rd string from the top or 4th string from the bottom. And then we've got our ring finger on the 2nd string, 2nd fret. Okay, so all the fingers are on the 2nd fret, and you have to kind of crunch them together. So we talked about how we want to have, our fingers close to the fret, but not touching the fret. And we don't want it too far back. So we've got to get these here, and then we've got to squish this finger in behind here on this middle string and sort of stick it nice and close. So we get nice, clean notes, all right? So that's your A chord. The top string's open, of course. So when you transition from E to A, so you have your E chord. So this finger, you just slide it up. So you don't have to lift this at all. So if you're going from E to A, you're going to do E. You're going to slide that up and put these 2 fingers down on the 2nd fret. E, A. Okay. Lots of songs use that transition, that chord progression. Ballad of John and Yoko. Christ, you know it ain't easy. You know how hard it can be. Ballad of John and Yoko. Peaceful, Easy Feeling by the Eagles uses an E progression using E and A. So there's lots of songs that use those 2 chords. So learn those chords, learn that transition. We're going to talk about how to embellish these chords. Like we talked about the D, we add this G with that finger to make these nice embellishments. With the E chord, you just have to add the pinky there on the 4th string. Makes a nice embellishment, suspended chord. And same with the A, you've got your A here. You can add your pinky here on the D note. And then you can lift your ring finger. So lots of songs use practice applying those little embellishments. So your E, A, D. Okay. So those are, now we have 5 major chords in open position. We have, let's start with A, then we have C, then we have D, then we have E, then we have G. All right, now you've got 3 different keys to work with there, so you'll find that G, A, and D go together, or yeah, G, well, D, so the key of D, A chord, G chord. Okay, so notice what I did there. D, I could do my A like that. I can also do it like this. That's a little harder to do. You're using one finger to press all 3 strings here. It's hard to get them all clear, right? Yeah. But sometimes we do that. All right. Okay, so those are your majors. I'm going to move on quickly to the minor chords that are in the open position. These are very important as well. You're going to find these chords mixed in with those major chords in all kinds of songs. So let's talk about the minors. So the first one we're going to talk about is E minor. So this is the same as your E major. Well, you're going to lift off your index finger and now you have E minor. So you've got your open string, middle finger on the 2nd fret on the 2nd string here, and your ring finger on the 2nd fret on the 3rd string. These 3 are open. So it gives it a nice ambient kind of sound. So the minor chords are, you know, a little more atmospheric, and they can be depressing. They can also be happy, but it's how they're used. So, example of where you'll hear this chord. I'm sure you've heard this song before. Right? Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. Does that movement into the E chord? Okay. So that's your E chord, sorry, your E minor chord. All right. So now, the next minor chord we're going to talk about is A minor. Another very important chord. You'll hear a lot of songs start with an A minor. Hear that movement all over the place. So how you do an A minor? So from an E minor, you're going to move these 2 fingers up a string. So now instead of 2nd string, 2nd fret, 3rd string, 2nd fret, you've got 3rd string, 2nd fret, 4th string, 2nd fret. Then your index goes here on this B string on the 1st fret. You can play the bass note, or the bottom note here, it's an E. Changes the color a little bit, but that's your main minor, okay? So you've got E minor, A minor, and finally there's only 3 minor chords in the open position. I'm thinking right. And that 3rd one is D minor. So D minor, a little more complicated. So you've got your index finger on the 1st fret on the 1st string. And you've got your pinky on the 2nd fret here. Some people might do it this way. I find that awkward. I find it much easier to do like this. All right? That makes it major, minor. So First finger on the first string, first fret. Pinky on the second string, third fret. That's a D note. And then you use your middle finger on the third string, second fret. So, boom, boom, boom. That's your D bass. So the real chord is these 4 strings. You can add this here. You don't want your E bass on there. That kind of wrecks the chord. So you can mute it out again with your thumb. Showed you that trick before. Okay, so what song's that? Right? So practice those. So a little bit of homework. And practice just transitioning. So we talked about E and A. So just practice that transition over and over until it fits in your fingers. Remember, your fingers are going to hurt. Give yourself a break, but remember, in 2 weeks, your fingers are going to be fine. And then you can practice this movement too, from the A to the D. Here, this is a really nice movement, A to D, because you only have to really move this finger. This one just slides to there. This one stays in the same place. So you're not always lifting your fingers up to change chords. So you wouldn't go when you can just... So whenever you can keep a finger in place or on the strings, you try and do that. You don't lift up unless you actually have to, if you're changing strings, right? So if you E to A, you're not going to lift this up and go like this. You're just going to slide it, right? Yeah, that makes your movements a lot easier, okay? So practice those movements and then practice your minor movements. Just practice going from E minor, 2 strings up, and add this second string, first fret, A minor and D minor. So practice that movement. You're moving from E minor, A minor, D minor, okay? And on our next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to cover a few songs that are using those chords. You know, your E minor goes with your G, and your A minor goes with your C, and your D minor goes with your F. Actually, we haven't talked about F. F is another open chord. It's a little more complex. So next lesson, we'll talk about the F chord, and we'll put together these movements from the minor chords to the major chords and talk about how they work together. So you're going to be practicing your E minor to A, your E major to A, E minor, A minor, D minor. Okay, so there you go. Let me know if you have any questions. Put your comments in the comments below, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.